open this event for us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Ebony, you're on mute. We can no longer see you. You're on mute, Ebony.
Sorry, I thought I hit the leave meeting versus got it. Apologies. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon to welcome Joseph Tazwell, Regional Director of Empire State Development Corporation, who is delighted to partner with our office to do this session. Thank you so much. Joe knows how important it is to help our Queens businesses and nonprofits build capacity. Tom Gretsch, President and of the Queens Chamber of Commerce, who is a reliable partner of this office. He helps us in his role as a member of the Regional Economic Development Corporation and in his role as President of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. And Dennis Redmond, Chief Strategy Officer at Queens Community House, another one of our community partners. We also welcome Becca Keating, Deputy Director of Development at the Museum of the Moving Image. And we thank both Becca and Dennis for providing us with the insight into how they have put together successful grant applications using the consolidated funding application process. I thank the economic development staff and Sharon Anderson for their help on today's webinar. I also thank Susie Tannenbaum, Director of the Borough President's Nonprofit Network, the Communications Director, Chris Barca, and tech teams for their support of these programs. As always, I am pleased to bring you today's information session for one reason, and that is to help ensure Queens has better applications for submission to the CFA funding pipeline. Due to COVID-19 and the pandemic in 2020, it was a lost year with the CFA process on hold. So in 2021 and 22, the CFA process resumed. However, Queens has not fared well. While we are proud of Far Rockaway for winning the first ever New York Forward Award of $4.5 million, our community project funding is still very low. Queens has consistently been in fourth place among the boroughs with the least number of applications. So we want to see more quality applications done. So these are challenging times, and the inflation rate has been 6.7%. The unemployment in June of 2020 was at 21.6%. And today, this month, the unemployment rate is at 5.4%. Promising, yes, it is very promising, but our population is growing fast and our infrastructure is old and needs investments, and we are challenged to be innovative to create new programming. Prior to the pandemic, Queens has close to 60,000 registered small businesses, over 100 large businesses with over 250 employees, and approximately 300 nonprofit organizations in the Queens Borough President's Nonprofit Network, representing all sectors of the community, and many of them are online today. Queens also has the diversity of people that are needed, 11 business improvement districts and strong mixed-use neighborhoods like Long Island City, Flushing, and Jamaica, which all demonstrates that Queens has the infrastructure to do better. Queens is undergoing the JFK Airport redevelopment, a $19 billion investment, redefining how we welcome tourists and visitors to New York City. Queens can do better by preparing our applicants and giving you the tools you need for better applications. And all of us are committed to serve as advocates for more applications that are streamlined, cohesive, and applications that are aligned with our priorities. So Queens can do better, and we are doing better. We have projects in Queens that we are proud of, like Gotham Green Urban Hydroponic Farm in Jamaica and Greater Nexus co-working spaces, and we want to see a lot more projects. So just know, that I am committed, the borough president is committed to doing everything he can to identify the groups and to help our groups meet funding eligibility. Now, I am delighted to welcome Tom Gretsch, President of the Queens Chamber of Commerce, who will provide an overview of the Regional Economic Development Council. Thank you all.
Thank you, Deputy Borough President. Much appreciated. And I must tell you in public, in front of all these fine folks, I truly appreciate your straight talk and your honesty about the fact that, listen, we should not be fourth to anybody of the 5 boroughs of the great city of New York, and we are. That's the fact. Over the course of time, I used to complain quietly to the right people about that fact. So sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for. And during the pandemic, I was asked to be one of the New York City REDC members, which it's a role that I take happily to kind of help drive the bus. So it's great to have a partner on all this with not only the deputy borough president, but with borough president Donovan Richards, who I consider a great partner in all things business. And just first an overview about Queens for those of you that are, I'm sure you know about our diversity, so I'm not going to continue to talk about that, but we know it, right? But if we were a city, we were the 4th largest city in America. Today, we are the largest geographic borough. And so we all know how much effort goes into kind of making sure that everything works and things happen. There are a ton of projects. By my last count, there's at least 28 billion with a B, billion projects, dollars of projects going on right now in Queens County, more than any of the other 3,000 or so counties in America. That includes the finalization of LaGuardia, the ramp up and startup of JFK Airport, as the deputy borough president mentioned, about $19 billion, plus the Flushing waterfront, plus Innovation QNS, plus the soccer stadium. There are literally hundreds of other smaller projects happening, be they commercial, residential, etc., that are going to be dotting the landscape so Queens can keep up. This is one area where it's really up to all of us. I look at it as I shoulder some of the responsibility to help get these projects reviewed and approved, but really it's up to the community at large to help get good projects up and running. And I can promise you that those that are part of the REDC, especially those that represent Queens, we want to be your champions. We need to be your champions. And like I said before, it's awful that we don't have more projects. That's about Queens. When it comes to the REDC, the state of New York is divided into 10 different sections. Queens is part of the greater New York City operation. And again, as the deputy borough president said, there are numerous projects being reviewed, voted upon, and then executed. Again, I'm lucky and blessed to be partners with the borough president on the Rockaway project, which is going to be a great shot in the arm for down there. But again, there's a slew of other things that can be reviewed and submitted in the CFA, and you're going to learn part about that today. So I look forward. If anybody wants to contact me directly, you can ping me in the chat. Happy to help. But again, we've got a great partner here in Joe Taswell from ESD, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Next up, we will hear from Joe Taswell, who will be providing a presentation on the CFA, the Consolidated Funding Application Process. Our tech personnel will help us by putting up a PowerPoint presentation, and we will hear from Tom shortly. Please keep track of your questions, because at the end of the presentations, we will ask for you to put your questions in the chat feature, and Tom, Gretch, and I will monitor them and present them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sharon. My name is Joe Taswell, and I'm the New York City Regional Director at Empire State Development. I'd like to thank the Borough President and the Deputy Borough President for hosting this virtual Consolidated Funding Application Info Session. I'd also like to recognize our Regional Council member representing Queens, Tom Gresh of the Queens Chamber, along with Sharon Anderson, who is Director of Economic Development for the Borough President. I'd also like to thank Dennis Redman of Queens Community House and Becca Keating of the Museum of Moving Image for being here and informing you of best practices in completing an application through the consolidated funding application. So today I'm going to be discussing round 13 of the Regional Economic Development Council initiative and $225 million in grants and tax credits that are being made available through the 2023 Consolidated Funding Application, or CFA for short. I'd like to note that this state assistance, which is primarily for capital projects, is available to businesses, nonprofits, and local government entities. Next slide, please. Well, first, a little background. In 2011, the Regional Economic Development Councils were created to transform the state's economic development process from a top-down approach of past years to a bottom-up, community-based, performance-measured approach where economic development decisions are being made locally by regional, business, academic, nonprofit, and local government leaders. The REDCs, for short, are guided by their strategic plans and identifying opportunities to recommend to the state for investment. Since 2011, over $7.7 billion has been awarded statewide to support over 9,500 projects, which will retain and create over 240,000 jobs. New York City has been awarded $686 million for 960 projects that will retain and create over 55,000 jobs. Next slide. The New York State Consolidated Funding Application was created in 2011 and marked a fundamental shift in the way economic development resources are allocated, ensuring less bureaucracy and greater efficiency to fulfill local needs and help businesses and other organizations invest in sustainable job growth. The CFA is a more efficient and effective tool for applicants to access multiple state funding sources. It functions as a single application that applicants can use to fund to apply from multiple state agencies using the same system and application. Prior to the CFA, applicants would have to slowly navigate through multiple state agencies without any mechanism for coordination. This year, Governor Hochul has made funding available for 30 programs across 10 state agencies. Next slide. So this slide gives you an overview of the two time tracks depending on which program you apply to. So the CFA opened on May 15th, 2023, and has a due date of July 28, 2023 at 4 p.m. sharp. 4 p.m. sharp. And let me repeat that. July 28, 2023, 4 p.m. sharp. There is no exceptions if you submit a late application. So please apply early. The application for ESD grant funds, which is now rolling, will remain open until funds are exhausted. Projects will be reviewed on a quarterly basis or more frequently if needed, and awards will be made available to projects as they are approved. Program-specific webinars are available for every funding program included in this process, and they are available on the Regional Council website at regionalcouncils.ny.gov. Let me repeat that, Regional Councils, one word, .ny.gov. Additionally, a full resource guide with full guidelines for every program is available on the Regional Council website as well. Next slide, please. Again, CFA funding for this year will be available from over 30 programs across 10 state agencies. The funding available through both the Regional Council initiative and other state programs. Many of these programs follow the traditional timeline, as I mentioned, of July 28th at 4 p.m. sharp. Awards will be made in the fall of 2023. This year, $150 million in ESD grant funds will continue to be available on a rolling basis. That's on a quarterly basis, meaning applicants can apply throughout the year rather than having their applications due by a specific date. The ESD grant funds, by the way, are capital program funds. ESD grant applicants will be notified of their awards as they are approved. As always, not every project is guaranteed funding. An emphasis will be placed on project readiness and alignment with the Regional Council strategic plan. Next slide, please. So this is the full list of the 30 programs, and I know this is difficult to read, so I'll go over each one in the next couple of slides. Next slide. So these are the programs offered by Empire State Development. There are ESD capital grant funds of up to $150 million. Now that's statewide, of course. And these are this is a catch-all program of economic development projects intended to create and retain jobs. Now, just a few things to note. Generally, ESD will provide no more than 20% of the total project costs for applications or projects under this program. However, for this year, there is an enhanced benefit, 40% for projects that support green buildings or sustainable development, childcare projects, or non-profit projects in severely distressed areas. So you can get a little more this year to support those projects: green buildings, sustainable development, childcare projects, or nonprofits in severely distressed or very severely distressed areas. Next is Excelsior, which is a fully refundable tax credit program up to $75 million. That's, of course, for businesses, being a tax credit program. The Business Incubator, up to $5 million statewide. There will be 8 designations this year, $125,000 in supporting workforce development funding over 5 years. And I should mention, in Queens, you have New York Designs at LaGuardia Community College, and the Entrepreneur Space, which is the cooking incubator. So I just wanted to note that you are represented in Queens with those 2 incubators. Market New York is our tourism program. Up to $15 million is available statewide to attract visitors to New York State by promoting designations, attractions, and special events. And lastly, there is a strategic planning and feasibility study program up to $1 million statewide. For any project, you can receive up to $100,000, and that has to be matched by another $100,000. So it's a 50% match on that program. Next slide, please. Homes and Community Renewal has its New York Main Street program up to $4.2 million, which provides resources to invest in projects that provide economic development and housing opportunities in downtown mixed-use commercial districts. The Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation has 2 programs: the Environmental Protection Fund of up to $26 million. That's for improvement of parks, historic properties, and heritage areas. The Recreational Trails Program up to $1.9 million, providing funding to develop and maintain recreational trails. Next slide. The Department of State has 2 programs: the Local Waterfront Revitalization, up to $16.3 million statewide. And these are, again, to revitalize communities and waterfronts. And then the Brownfield Opportunity Area Program, up to $2.5 million statewide, which provides funding to allow an area to develop a brownfield opportunity area or pre-development activities to advance a brownfield opportunity area. Next program is New York State Canals, $1 million available to municipalities along the state canal system. Next slide, please. The New York State Power Authority has a program called Recharge New York, which provides assistance up to 19.4 megawatts is available statewide, which is designed to retain and create jobs through allocation of low-cost electricity. NYSERDA has 2 programs: the Carbon Neutral Economic Development Program, up to $10 million, and a Commercial Industrial Carbon Challenge, up to $15 million. Next slide, please. And then Ags and Market has a grown and certified infrastructure program up to $5.8 million, which is available to administer a grant program that will assist agricultural entities in implementing projects that invest in critical farm infrastructure. Next slide. Then there is a list of what I would call standalone programs, and these are programs that are not scored by the Regional Economic Development Council, but are a part of the Regional Council initiative. And so we don't have time to go through each one, but there are webinars on each of these programs, which I will flag when we come to a slide. So if you have any questions, I would first go to the webinar and the Q&A that exist online. But I'll bring this up in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to make a note of this. This is in general is the state's strategy for economic development. These four areas: placemaking, which is the notion that where investment occurs matters, and this is again to attract talented workforce and to create quality of life, accessible job centers, etc. Workforce development, which is the belief that talent, people, drive the economy. Tradable sectors, that's really to support areas, businesses that export. And innovation, of course, which is a strategy of investing in research and commercialization to drive our economy. Next slide, please. So this is a process that really requires a little homework. Before you begin, and I think hopefully our awardees that are going to be speaking later will speak to this, but this is a process that requires you really to do a little research on the Regional Council website. And so this is the New York City Regional Council's annual report from 2022. It talks a great deal about workforce development and the three clusters that we're looking at as priorities for New York City. But on our website also there is a criteria for what I'll call priority projects, and that's the next slide, please. So here's our criteria. Here's the Regional Council for New York City's criteria on how it views what are priority projects. Now, priority projects are, which I'll discuss a little later, are the top projects, the projects that score the best, and are generally the projects that will receive funding. So there's a list on the website where you can get a greater description of these areas. But I would say workforce development, job creation, of course, relief of conditions of economic distress, leveraging investment, social or economic transformation, feasibility, or what we call is the project ready to go, shovel ready, measurable impact, our innovation economy, partnerships with higher education institutions, strong business partnerships, and interregional cooperation. Again, on the Regional Council website, regionalcouncils.ny.gov, if you go to the New York City page, you will see the priority project criteria. It's important to look at this as you complete an application, because you will be asked specifically, how does your project align with the regional, with the region's priorities? So these are important things to understand. Next slide. So this continues. So this is specifically for round 13. We added new priorities. Again, as I mentioned, green building and sustainable development, childcare projects, projects located in severely, and that is the nonprofit projects located in severely distressed communities. And then lastly, innovative public-private partnerships with educational institutions. Next slide. So next I'm going to be talking a little bit about the mechanics of the consolidated funding application. Next slide. First, let's talk about the scoring. So the scoring for regional council process is really two-part. First, the regional council, which is the 30 or so members of the regional council, score these applications. There is actually a scoring committee, and then the regional council, the full regional council, will then ratify those scores. Just so you understand, the regional council scores count for 20% of the overall scoring. So 20% from the regional council, and then the respective state agency is 80% of the total score. So just to go through this real quickly, as I mentioned, priority project. So a project that scores the highest, or an application that scores the highest, is considered a priority, and that's if it receives a 20 points. The next level is 15, which is, if a project is strongly related to the strategic plan, but isn't quite at the very top, but that's a 15. Next is 10 points will be awarded if the proposal advances the strategic plan, but just has local benefits. 5 points will be awarded if a proposal is consistent with the strategic plan and has project level benefits. And then, of course, no points will be awarded if the proposal is weak or has limited relationship to the strategic plan. So again, it's through the lens of the strategic plan, through the lens of the regional council strategic plan, that these projects are scored. So that's why it's important to understand the regional council strategy. Next slide. So when you go to regionalcouncils.ny.gov, this is the interface you will see. It starts with the governor's announcement of round 13, but then it has links to resource information that is very important. They include the CFA Resources Guide, the REDC Guidebook, which actually describes what the regional council process is, and then other information. So there are links to the CFA, links to webinars, links to various other things that will be helpful to you as you complete your application. So again, you need to start this process early, so you can explore all the various resources and know where you're going, because you can, this is not a process that you can do in an afternoon. And oftentimes people do that. They wait until the end to apply, and they get timed out because they haven't actually been able to investigate all these areas. Next slide, please. So this is the interface for the consolidated funding application itself. And in a bit, I'll be talking about the login and some of the mechanics. But at the very bottom of this page are, again, links to resource information that will be helpful as you explore the programs and the process for how to complete one of these applications. Next slide. So as I had mentioned earlier, there are other programs, kind of standalone programs, that are not being scored by the regional council, but you can through this website you can be linked to program information, and there's also webinars on all of these programs. So I would again suggest that you explore this before you apply. Next slide, please. So when you log in, or the first thing you have to do is get a token or password. So you first need to register your project. Screen will appear containing the organization name, project alias name, and a token or password. It is important for you to print this page and copy down the token number. Then you should check your email for a message from cfa@ny.gov. It will contain the application number and a link to activate your account. You should also save a copy of this email and keep it with login information. If you do not receive the email within 5 minutes of registering, please check your spam folder for the email. Now, the arrow is pointing to a series of other interface. So if you know what program you want to apply for, then you can go directly to that program and complete the application. If you're not sure, then there is a program wizard where applicants can see what programs may be applicable to their project. So it will take you through, ask you a series of questions and take you through that process, and then finally take you to the program to complete. But again, you may know this ahead of time. I think it's actually better to try to see which programs you might be eligible for prior to applying. Next slide. So once an applicant selects the programs to apply for, they need to answer a series of threshold questions. You must answer all these threshold questions before proceeding to the next section to determine if your project is initially eligible. Once you complete the threshold questions, if deemed eligible, you can advance to the rest of the application. So just a few notes. Mailing hard copies of the application is not an option. It's all got to be done through the consolidated funding application. And then in addition, the application may ask you to upload certain documents, support documents. So again, all these documents must be uploaded before the application can be finalized. So you need to do that. It can't be mailed in. Next slide, please. So if you're applying for the ESD Capital Grant Program or the Excelsior Program, there is a new tab asking questions about jobs. Both, are these part-time jobs? Are these contract jobs? I just wanted to make a note of that. Next slide. Okay, and then again, just review the information before submitting. The application will now allow you to finalize until all required questions and attachments have been completed. After you finalize and submit your application, it cannot be modified or amended. So be very careful, take your time. Please do whatever research is necessary. Again, this system is set up so that you don't have to do it in one sitting. You can fill in the application, come back to it. So so I think the best thing is to take your time. So there's still more than a month to complete an application. So start soon. Next slide. And again, if you have any questions, go to regionalcouncils.ny.gov. And let me give you my email, the office here at ESD. It is NYS-NYC@ESD.NY.gov. Now I'm listed on the ESD website under the New York City regional office. Our phone number is also listed, and that email is listed again, NYS-NYC@ESD.NY.gov. That completes my presentation, and now I would like to I'll let Shern.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe, for that wonderful presentation. Very thorough and detailed. I hope that everyone is being well informed on the CFA process. Next up, we will hear from Dennis Redmond. Dennis is the Chief Strategy Officer at the Queens Community House. My teammate here at the Borough President's Office will put up a presentation. And
Great,
Dennis,
thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
you're welcome.
Just briefly, Queens Community House is a multi-service settlement house that is currently working out of 15 different neighborhoods in Queens. I'm going to talk briefly about actually two different applications that we put in. One is a capital application and the other is a programmatic grant. The capital grant was for the renovation of our Forest Hills Community Center. The site is the organization's original program site, and since our founding has also been home to our administrative headquarters. And in 2019, we received a grant from the REDC through the Empire State Development Grant Funds program to support the renovation of the center. It was up until 2017, the building was part of a NYS public housing development that sits right on the corner of Forest Hills and Corona. And in 2017, the residents of the building actually bought the property from NYS, which gave us the opportunity to then turn around and negotiate the sale of the community center to us from the tenants. So we were able to take control of the center in 2019. As many of you are probably aware, NYS has been severely underfunded for years. So the building had very few improvements and renovations over its almost 50-year life, and was really in need of a gut rehab, including replacing all of the electrical, the plumbing, the HVAC system, to make a lot of improvements to accessibility issues. We installed an elevator, ADA improved bathrooms, the ramp that you see in front of the building there. And then a lot of other just additions and changes that made the space much more usable and much more updated and friendly for the community. It's a site that's really heavily used. We have about 500 people coming through a day, about 5,000 people over the course of a year, a variety of programs, including workforce development, a senior center, after school program, and et cetera. The REDC grant was the first grant that we got, and we were able to use that to subsequently get some generous support from the Borough President's Office, from the City Council. We also did a substantial amount of private fundraising from foundations and from individual donors. The next slide, please. So in terms of our strategy, as Joe mentioned, we did spend a lot of time really looking through the annual report, the REDC materials that describe what their priorities were, what they were looking for, and really to think about how do we position our application to really look at the criteria and the guidelines and the priorities that they had laid out there. And what we decided to do was to highlight the role that community-based organizations, and in particular community center, provides in terms of what they defined as strategic community investment. And then to talk about several ways that linked directly to the REDC strategic plan. So first of all, we talked about ourselves as an employer. We employ almost 600 individuals over the course of the year, a mixture of full-time and part-time. We talked about how having additional program space in our site was going to help us to increase the number of programs and then hire additional staff. The site runs an after-school program. We also, as an organization, run about 15 after-school programs in the borough, as well as a childcare network that supports family daycare providers. And through that, we're really working with almost 2,500 families in the borough and providing them with childcare. So we're really working with working families, and through these programs are providing direct childcare to the members of the families that we're working with. We talked about our workforce training programs that we do at the site. We have sector-focused workforce training, but we also have 5 alternative high schools that we run in partnership with the DOE. We are a provider of the city's summer youth employment program. And through that, we work with about 2,000 young adults and place them in internships, paid internships over the course of the year, working a lot with local businesses. So obviously it's a great opportunity for the young adults to get work experience, to earn some cash, and it also becomes a great support for a lot of local businesses who get that sort of free labor and get also the opportunity to mentor young adults. Very often we do see that translate into actual jobs and being the young adults being hired by the businesses. We talked a lot about the neighborhood stabilization. We have a large housing assistance program at the center that works both with tenants who need repairs made, works with older adults who are applying for SCREE so they can get subsidies to keep their rent frozen so they can stay in the community. And we also work with landlords to make sure that they're keeping up to building codes and they're keeping their housing stock healthy and in code. And we sort of see that as really helping the economic stabilization of the community that we're there. And then the last thing is just with the community center, we talked about how we provide economic support to the direct communities that we're in. Whether it's, frequenting local restaurants and local stores, we, as much as possible, try to buy locally from the vendors who are in the communities that we're working in. So these are all the ways that we sort of try to highlight how we were fitting into some of the priorities that had been identified by the REDC, as well as talking about leveraging the investment. So as I mentioned, we got about 1.4 million from the REDC for the project out of what eventually turned out to be a $16 million project. So it was also a way of leveraging public and private investment in the community. And as I spoke about previously, a lot of opportunities to talk about how we're working with the public sector, but also with a lot of different members of the private sector, both large businesses as well as sort of small family-owned businesses in the community. The next slide, please. So the second thing that we did, as I mentioned, was was also through the CFA process. It was for a program that we do called the Young Adult Food Sector Employment Initiative. It's actually a project that we do in collaboration with 3 other settlement houses in the borough. And the program is focused on working with young adults 17 to 24 who are out of school, who do not have any sort of clear career path. We chose the food sector because we felt like it was a sector that was very accessible to young adults who didn't necessarily have a college degree. It was also a sector that where having a second language other than English is a great asset. And many of our young adults do speak second languages other than English. We put the program together working with local businesses to try to find out what they were looking for in terms of hiring young adults. And 2 of the things then that we built into the program is we help the young adults get a customer service certification and also the New York City Food Protection certification, which were 2 things that the business owners sort of identified to us as things that were great assets. We also provide internships, paid internships, and then job placement through this. Next slide, please. So in terms of thinking for this program, it was also very similar to what we went through with the capital project, really reading through the materials, reading through the state priorities, looking at what they're doing and seeing how this particular program really met certain criteria. So in this case, we were seeing that they were looking for the idea of training young adults for sectors that have growth opportunity, and that there was real, not just we were providing entry-level jobs, but it was also very clear how within those sector jobs, there was opportunities for the young adults to continue advancing. We were working with a population that was identified as a priority population that included unemployed or underemployed. It included at-risk youth. It included immigrants or children of immigrants, low-income families, young adults coming from low-income families, court-involved individuals, and also we work a lot with young adults coming out of the foster care system. So we were able to describe how this particular program was working very specifically with a population that had been identified as high need by the state. And again, we were able to really lay out how this program was working very closely with local businesses, both in terms of providing them with internships, but also working with the businesses to help them understand how to mentor young adults coming into the field, and then continuing to provide retention support to those young adults once they were placed in those jobs. So we were able to describe how we were not only providing young adults who had training and certification, but that we were going to continue to support them and any conflicts that might come up during the first year of employment to continue to work with both the employed young adult and the employer to make sure we could resolve that situation in a way that was positive for both of them. The food hospitality sector was identified as an opportunity sector by the state, so we saw that was a good fit. Once again, we talked about how this was leveraging private investment. We receive about $225,000 from the state out of what is close to a $1.2 million budget. Some of that comes from the DOE, but a big chunk of it is coming from private fundraising and a lot of foundation support. So we were able to talk about how this investment from the state, we were able to use it to leverage some private investment that comes into the community. And in terms of the application process, in this particular instance, as Joe mentioned, when we went for the capital grant, it was pretty clear to us which grant we should be applying for. But in terms of the workforce training program, at the time that the state was beginning to put in the CFA process was relatively new at that point. What was very helpful for us is we had a hard time figuring out there were several different funding streams that we thought we could go for. And what we were told was just to describe the program and, as I said, try to meet the criteria, and then they would come back to us, which they did, and recommend that we submit the grant directly for a Department of Labor grant, which is the grant that we now have. So we found that was very helpful in this particular instance with the program grant, because as I mentioned, there were a couple of different funding streams that we thought might be sort of relevant to what we were speaking about. So other than that, you just, reiterate what Joe said about starting early. The application was a little bit unusual for us in terms of what we usually do. So we needed to go through and really see what each question was specifically asking, and to do a little bit thinking about how what we were doing really fit well within what the state was looking.
Wonderful.
And so with that, I think I'll close. And Sharon, do you want to introduce Becca?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So thank you, Dennis. That was very, very thorough, very good, and a really good example of best practices. And I think you did a wonderful job on that. Thank you. And now I'm pleased to welcome Becca Keating she's Deputy Director of Development at the Museum of the Moving Image. Becca, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Dennis. That was such a wonderful presentation, and congratulations on your amazing work. So as mentioned, I'm the Director of Development at Museum of the Moving Image. We are an almost 40-year-old institution that is dedicated to the art, history, and technology of the moving image in all of its facets. We are a nonprofit institution, and we also are an educational facility. We serve over 70,000 school children and students throughout the year from K to 12, as well as college age, coming through our museum to learn how to be media, I'm going to use the word media very loosely, media fluent and literate. So how to look at the most ubiquitous art form of our time, and to be able to recognize, what is fact and what is fiction, and where is play, and how do we understand ourselves and the world through this medium. So given that, these are our priorities and we are a museum, we were really encouraged by our state lobbyists, the right group, to encourage or to apply for this grant, in particular for the Market New York grant that's available. One of the biggest challenges for the museum throughout its history has been, doing amazing programming, but how do you get the word out to people? And how do you make sure that everyone knows that these things are taking place right in your backyard? Or, how do we bring people from outside of the area here and make sure that they know that we're providing this programming for them? So given that was, our major challenge, I I looked at the grant, I don't want to be too repetitive from what Dennis was saying, but, we looked at the grant and what they were looking for and what the regional and state priorities were. And I do have to say, so we ended up receiving this grant, the Market New York grant, and we were listed as a priority project. And I think a big portion of that was because, as Dennis was mentioning, we really were like, okay, how do we fit into these priorities and what is our lean here? How are we special? And so we came up with this project where we took a few things that we were going to be doing over the course of the next year and lumped them kind of together under an umbrella. So it was called Cinema, Sensations, and Marvels. The World Comes to Queens. And this essentially was taking 4 projects that we had coming up and lumping them together under the idea that we were bringing international artists to the museum. And that the idea was if we could have a budget that was big enough that we could be, appropriately marketing these programs, we could bring international communities here as well. So not just the artists that we were bringing in, but we could bring, other tourists that would be interested in the work of these artists to the museum as well. And so we can move to the next slide and I can get into some of what these projects were. So the first one was an exhibition that we opened in March, and it is called Cinema of Sensations, the Never-Ending Screen of Jose Valderomar. And Jose Valderomar was a Spanish artist who was making work mostly in the time and under Franco in Italy. And so he was not only an artist, but a machinist and an inventor. However, because he was making this work under an authoritarian government, he wasn't able to share that work with, others outside of his space. And he was making these incredible inventions. Like he was the first person that invents surround sound and expanded cinema experiences and performing with projection and, altering the lens of the projector to play with the moving image in a space. And so he had never had an American, a North American even, in fact, exhibition. And so we're putting on this exhibition, and we commissioned 4 international contemporary artists to finally be able to make work in conversation with Valderomar's work for the first time directly. And so they got to play with his personal archive and, make works that were in conversation with him in one way or another. And this exhibition is taking over the whole museum. And as you see, it's on until October 1st, and I hope everyone will come and see it. But, it was an exhibition that was quite expensive for the museum to put on. And so the monies that we would typically have for marketing this, we're going into the exhibition, and we really needed help to make sure that we could get audiences to come and see this, because it was a risk. No one really knows about this man. Will people come? And so we really hit on in our application that, this money would help us to raise attendance for this. And that raising attendance for this is not only going to help the artists whose work are being submitted in the museum itself, but it's going to help the hotel down the street that we work with to, put up all the filmmakers and attendees. And that is our partner that we have a discount code with that, we encourage everyone to go and stay with. It also helps our neighborhood partners. So the museum works very closely with the local restaurants and businesses here. And if you have a membership card or a ticket stub or anything like that, and you go in, you get a certain discount. And during this exhibition and the other programs that we'll talk about later, we ran special promotions with those businesses and restaurants to help encourage people to attend there as well. Finally, the other big point on this, because I don't want to take too much time on this one project, this was the first time and us putting a foot forward that we instituted dual language wall text for our exhibitions. So now every changing exhibition that we put up at the museum will be both in English and in Spanish. And so that allowed us, from a marketing perspective, to feel more free to market in Spanish language and also in Spanish language publications. Additionally, knowing that those people who would be coming from those publications would be able to come and fully understand what they were seeing and wouldn't feel that it was inaccessible in any way. And so the funding that we received from the Market New York grant went to help us do a major opening reception where we had, hundreds of people there from all over New York, but also from Spain and Mexico and everywhere. And we brought concierges and people from the Tourism Council to the opening reception, as well as the Spanish consulate and other people. We made sure everyone was there so that then the word would organically, spread from there. We also worked with our publicists to ensure that, media alerts were picked up and it was listed in big publications. And so we can move to the next slide. And that will kind of detail. So we have received incredible coverage and support for this, which has only helped to bolster the ads that we've placed in this as well. So we currently, and because it's a 6-month exhibition, we didn't have to do everything all at once in March. So we did a lot at the beginning because you want to do that so that you have this next 6 months to have word of mouth and everything spread. But now we have ads running in Art Forum magazine and in New York magazine as well, that we were able to purchase with the support of this Market New York grant to help us continue this increase in attendance that we're seeing and especially go hard through the heavy international tourism months of the summer in New York City. And so thus far, when we would typically, as the museum, see a bit of a trickle at this point of year, our attendance numbers are actually rising, which is great, and really helps us in the wake of coming back after COVID and everything as well, obviously. Finally, another part of this grant is going into helping us actually do some benchmarking and helping us to do some research. So we're working with a firm that towards the end of the year will come in and help us do some case studies and see how effective we've been at spreading the word about these events, as well as the museum in general and our local community. So next slide, please. Our other event that was featured in this was our First Look Festival, which takes place every March, in the middle of March. And this program brings in international filmmakers from all over the world for these 5 days to premiere these. The festival premieres films that haven't screened in New York City yet from all areas of the world. We had a filmmaker at closing night from Nigeria. We had someone in from Croatia, and so we're bringing, dozens of filmmakers here. And then additionally, filmmakers travel to come and see and participate as audience members in this, as well as our local and distant, we had people coming down from Toronto, and we had visitors that were in from Philly and Florida and Missouri. People want to come and participate in this festival. We host works in progress as a part of this as well. And so it's a real opportunity for us to share with all of these various audiences the process behind making these films. And so with the help of this Red Sea Market Grant, we saw 140% increase in attendance this year. I mean, it was wild. And that has helped because we were able to place ads in other film festival program guides, and able to take out more ads earlier in anticipation of the festival. So more people could make travel plans to come and book those hotels. Additionally, we collaborated with our local restaurants and Paper Factory, the hotel down the street, to do a block of rooms so that if you did come, and you were coming from the festival, you got an additional discount on your room space. So we made it as easy as possible for people to come. And it worked really well for us because this time of year, the Paper Factory and the restaurants around us, they really are looking for more people to come and be in their spaces, and they want to be more busy at this time. So we really work closely with them to ensure that everyone knows kind of where to go. We have after parties that we direct people to these areas and really encourage participation. So the grant, in addition to covering those ads, it also covered, again, the opening night reception and this additional publicity that we were able to create with an outside publicist who focused specifically on more niche cinephile audiences that worked very well, as you'll see on the next slide, please. So we received incredible publicity for this festival that is a big tout to our programming team, but also to the publicists that we're working with and the incredible films that we were able to show and get because of the rising prevalence of the festival. And I want to be cognizant of time, so we'll move on to the next. Finally, we also were able to put on our Marvels of Media event, which randomly, and I don't know why all of these events are happening in March. I swear normally we do things outside in other times of year too. This year was a very busy March. But our Marvels of Media Awards and Festival is an event that we started 2 years ago, which is focused on celebrating neurodiverse and autistic makers on the autism spectrum. And so we do an open call for submissions and award and highlight and show in an exhibition and in a film festival and through workshops. These works and celebrate them over the course of the month of April, which of course is Autism Awareness Month as well. So the grant here helped us not only to spread the word about the open call to get more people to submit submissions, which we saw our largest submission pool yet this year, but it also helped us to bring in the international filmmakers to make sure that they were present and to show their work, host a reception, and do major publicity for this. So if we go to the next slide, you will see Marvels was featured on Fox 5, on Spectrum New York 1, Hollywood Reporter. It had massive social media presence as well, thanks to all of the media makers who were chosen to participate in this, really sharing and pushing that as well. And none of this would have been possible without the spend that we were able to make due to the Market New York grant. And so I think that, what we were able to do with this project is to really raise our own profile while raising the profile of the region and of Queens in general as well. I think that in our application, we really focused on those, that it's about placemaking. It's also about job creation and job sustainability for the people in our neighborhood and region, as well as here at the museum, in addition to those that we're promoting through the programs that we're doing. I think all of these were important aspects that we needed to hit on in our application to get that priority listing. I think it also really helped that we had so much room to grow in the aspects of our marketing budget too. And so the grant really had a vast impact on us, as you see from these numbers and this publicity as well. And the fact that we'll come out with benchmarks and KPIs on the other side as well. Excuse me. Happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you, Becca. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, 2 great presentations, 2 success stories from 2 different nonprofits in our community that are doing great work, from 2 different lenses. So they showed us how the community and the businesses in the community benefit and how the program grows, right? So we'll be happy to share the PowerPoint from the New York State Regional Economic Development with all the attendees from today's program. I'd like to thank Becca Keating and Dennis Redmond, and of course, Joe Tazwell. But first, please continue to put your questions in the chat feature, and Tom, Gretch, and I will take some questions. And let's see, I'll put some questions on the floor at this time.
As Sharon finds those questions and tracks them, I ask everybody else on this call to please pop a few of your own, no matter what they might be, into the chat so we can put them out there and try to answer them.
Okay, so yes, I'm reiterating that we will be sharing the PowerPoint presentation with all the attendees of today's program. Next up, Leah Carter is asking, for the $150 million that's allocated to New York State, how much of that comes down to New York City, and then how much of that further down to Queens directly?
Well, loosely, every region is eligible for a maximum of $20 million. But that's not even, but 10 regions, that doesn't, you can't divide that evenly. So it's somewhere between 10 and $20 million every region. I have to say Queens did very well. I mean, in terms of numbers of application in the latest batch we had this last quarter, I think Queens did better than everyone, or at least it showed up better than everyone. So we'll hopefully have some good news for Queens in a few weeks.
May I just say
Right.
something too? There's an old saying in the New York lottery called "You got to be in it to win it," right? So at the end of the day, we have not been in it and we have not won it in the past. But now is the time, right? Hopefully you can tell the passion and enthusiasm of not only me, but also Borough President Richards and Joe and Sharon about we want Queens to participate more fully. Again, I look at it as, for me, it's a personal affront when we have 5 boroughs and we're in 4th place. No disrespect to the other 4 boroughs, but we're the largest geographic, the 4th largest city. There is no way we should be lagging. And so that's why we kind of, at least I'm trying to implore folks to apply, because the law of averages tell you the more that we have in there to vote and look at as members of this group, believe me when I tell you, I want to be your champion, but you got to be in it.
Next question we have from Chris Salbudis, who's asking, which is the best program to apply to as an educational nonprofit?
Well, that's a good question. I would say the ESD capital, if you have a capital project. I mean, let me just say that the CFA for the regional council is largely capital funding. I think Dennis referenced a workforce development program through Department of Labor, but the workforce development initiative kind of rolled in all of the workforce money, and that is now through the CFA, but it's not part of the regional council. It's a separate initiative. A lady named Amber Rangal is running that in Albany. And so that application is available for educational institutions, for example, that are doing workforce training, and other nonprofits, I should say. It's actually not available for private businesses. It's really directed toward nonprofits that are doing workforce development work.
So, Susie Tannenbaum asked for you to please clarify which of the grant programs are available to nonprofit organizations. Is it specifically ESD grant funds and ESD strategic planning and feasibility programs?
No, not only. I mean, ESD capital grant funds, like I think both Dennis and Becca mentioned, they're both nonprofits, right? So
Yes.
they both, Becca, in the case of Becca, she got a Market New York grant, which was a tourism grant. So actually, most of the programs are available for nonprofits, and fewer are available for businesses, honestly. So but you need to take a close look to make sure you're going to meet the eligibility and because they vary, right? Some programs will require you to have a match of a certain amount, and some others. So just take a look at the guidelines.
Right. The ESD strategic planning and feasibility asks for you to have a match. So it really depends, right?
That's a 50-50 match, that program. Yes.
Exactly. Sarah Fraser asked, are you able to apply to multiple programs with the same application?
That is the nifty part of the CFA. You are able, to the extent that you are eligible, are able to apply for multiple funding streams for the single project. Now, if you have 2 separate projects, for example, let's say you have, you shouldn't apply. You should put in 2 CFAs if you have a different project. You don't want to mix apples and oranges. It used to be that the arts funding was part of the CFA, but that was pulled out, and it's now standalone with NYSCA. The same thing with Department of Labor. They're now they have they're standalone. They're not part of the CFA. But yes, you can do that.
Okay, wonderful. Lydia is asking, can we apply to multiple REDCs if our project covers 2 regions?
You don't have to apply to multiple RED. Let me clarify. You can put in one application and it will cover multiple regions. but you should approach that regional council separately, right? So if I have a project that's going to cover New York City and Long Island, or New York City and the Hudson Valley, you know, you need to, you can put in one application and there'll be a score, but you need to make sure that all of the regions are aware of the project and that you're doing outreach.
Off the top of your head, can you think of a quick example of something like that, Joe?
I remember a tour boat
Okay.
that was going up the Hudson River.
Okay. Yeah.
That of course touched, you know, 3 regions.
Right.
You know,
Excellent.
capital, New York City, and the Hudson Valley. Yeah.
Right.
Sharon, there's some internal comments in there, but the next question, if I may read it off.
Sure.
Can an organization apply to more than one project? Is there a cap at funding applications? That's a Joe Tazwell.
No, I mean, well, as long as they're viable. I mean, so no, you can apply to, you can put in as many CFAs as you want, but it shouldn't be for the same project. It should be for separate projects. But no limitation as far as I know.
Excellent. I know as an example, the New York City DOT and New York City Parks Department have in the past submitted, right, applications, and they're doing regional work within the parks in all the boroughs, and regional work with infrastructure around the city as well. So those are also examples of, you know, the city being part of it as well.
Right. I mean, the idea here is that we are trying to streamline the application, right? That way you don't have to approach each individual agency separately. So that's why, you know, to the extent that there's overlap and that you're able to apply, like, for example, you know, many applicants that have tourism will apply both to ESD capital grants and Market New York for a capital project. That's an example.
Right. Okay, I have a question for Becca from Lydia. Becca, how do you work with the company who does the KPI to track the results of Market New York support? Thank you.
Yeah. So we worked with, or we are working with them. It's in process because our grant is still in process. But we factor that into our grant by showing that, you know, it would allow us to report back on how successful we were being, is how that was written into our application. And so now, you know, we're starting to work with this firm and figuring out the best way that we can do that. What's the best way that we can show the impact that this grant has had for the museum and for our area and tourism in general.
Okay, wonderful. I believe this is for Joe. Joe David is asking, can an organization apply to more than one project? Is there a cap at funding applications?
No, I think as I referenced, I don't think there's a limitation. Sharon, if I may say one thing, you know, I didn't address the issue of MWBEs. The state law requires for these programs, all these programs, where applicable, the 30% MWBE contracting requirement. So, like, of the assistance that's coming, that is part. And if I may ask, I mean, maybe I asked Becca or Dennis to address that. Did you approach, or did MWBs approach you, or did you identify MWBs as part of your project?
Yeah, so I can talk about that. And I would say they need to be, the one thing that we found out at the museum is they need to be state WMBEs, not right. City WMBEs. That was we ran into that late. And so just a heads up to everyone on that end. And no, we are the ones actually seeking out the folks. And so the people that we're working with for the research is the money we're paying them is basically making up the majority of our WMBE match for that.
Excellent.
Yeah, and we did through our contractors. That was one of the things that we had both for the city money and the state money had the requirement. So it was one of the things, the criteria when we did do interviewing of contractors was who had a good experience working with NWBE subcontractors.
Excellent. And that's still at 30%, just that it needs to be state MWBE, right, Joe?
Exactly for the state money. Yes. But
Excellent.
city may have its own.
Yes, the city does, yes. Joe, could you repeat your email address for the New York City ESD?
Yes, so the office here, NYS as in New York State, NYS dash NYC at esd.ny.gov.
Okay. Okay, we have a capacity question from Susie Tannenbaum. Do nonprofits need to have a minimum annual budget to apply for these grants, or do the criteria vary by grant program?
Well, I mean, we will evaluate the financial viability of a nonprofit, right? And there is and maybe again, Becca and Dennis can chime in on Grants Gateway, which is a step that nonprofits have to go through eventually. It could, in some cases, it's before the application. In other cases, it can come later. Becca, did you go through that, or Dennis?
Yeah, so I can say as an arts organization, we were already set up in Grants Gateway because you have to be to get NISCA funding as well, and so that has just always been a part of our process, and keeping that, you have to update it every year. It's quite simple. For the most part, it's just typical forms that you need to submit, but you do need to make sure that you are registered and able to receive money through the state this way to participate in the grant.
It's the same for us. We were previously, but.
Excellent. Tom, do you have any more questions? Please put your questions in the chat feature. We have a few more minutes of time.
I don't see any of the questions in the chat, but again, I just think it's really important to reiterate the desire for Queens projects. And I don't think, Joe, I don't think as a member of the RDC, I can necessarily assist, but there's plenty of resources, right? If people have questions about the actual package, like what do I dot this I, do I cross this T? Are there resources for folks to go to get that kind of help?
Well, sure. I mean, our staff can help. I mean, depending on the program, I mean, we can certainly answer questions if it's any of the ESD programs. There again, in the webinars, there are all these webinars, pre-recorded webinars with question and answer and PowerPoints and all that. And all of these webinars have a contact person. So like I probably am not the appropriate person to ask a question about parks, for example, or Department of State or something like that. But we can certainly put you in touch with the people if you have specific questions about those programs. Yeah, but
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but I can speak to the process at the regional council level, and that process.
I would even go so far as to say, my email is always open, my cell phone, people know who I am. Email me your questions. We'll get an answer for you. It's that important because, once the money is gone to other places, it's gone. And so we'll pull all the stops to help folks out for this. And the other thing I would say too, for me in closing, is pass the word. Get the word out. We're blasting it out. I have a 23,000 opt-in email blast list, and whenever Joe sends me stuff about things like this event today, or the borough president does, we share it. We want the word to get out there, so don't be bashful.
And let me mention, I did not address one thing that's connected to the regional councils, which is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and the New York Forward program, which are run through Department of State. These are allocations of funds that go to communities. And so we're now entering I believe it would be the 7th round of downtown revitalization. Queens has received $10 million for in the first round of this through downtown Jamaica, and then last year to Far Rockaway. So this is a public process, right? So there will be so Far Rockaway will have and Tom is actually the co-chair of the local planning committee. If you want to talk about that, feel free, Tom. I don't know if that's.
I mean, So myself and Borough President Richards co-chair that, and it's a very hands-on operation where we're soliciting community input for what we're going to spend the money on, frankly. And it's a very aggressive, engaging conversation, and it's made up of all folks from the community. And I have the honor of herding the cats with Joe and the staff and the consultants and Stern and the borough president.
Yes, so the Far Rockaway community won $4.5 million. As we said, we're very proud, but we know we need to do more, right? And so we're spending the next 6 months in this community engagement process, calling for community projects that we can allocate these funds to in order to build out for the community and to build upon what has already gone on in the Far Rockaway. I don't know if you guys have heard about all the improvements and all the new development and infrastructure investments that have taken place in the Rockaways in recent years. And so we're excited to have this opportunity to build upon that. And, we're going to continue the process of looking around the borough of Queens to see where else we have a downtown that needs help, right? That needs assistance, that needs investment. And so we're going to continue that process. 10 years, was it 10 years ago already, Joe, that downtown Jamaica won $10 million. And so, this is a new year and then a new opportunity, since the other boroughs have had a turn, that we can possibly, submit another application for another neighborhood here in Queens. So we're continuing to look for those opportunities, and we're excited to be participating in all of that.
There is one more question popped up there. I'm sorry, Sharon. Gene Siva, is there a percentage for each borough, or is it first come, first served? Again, the 10 regional economic development councils are made up of people from academia, business, and so on. So the New York City ones has representatives from each of the 5 boroughs. So it's not really a percentage as far as who gets awarded. It is a voting process when these projects come up. Joe is kind of make sure me and my peers on this group vote and get our points of view across. So Joe, it's not really it is kind of a first come, first serve based upon who votes for what project, right?
Yeah, it's a competitive. I mean, this is a competitive process, and so yes, everyone. We want to make sure that everyone gets their fair share, but it's got to, what the state is interested in are projects that are what we call shovel ready to go, and are put together, nicely, and are going to have, significant economic development impacts. So that's what we're looking for. And I know that's not easy, in all cases, but that's generally speaking how the REDC is making these investments.
Absolutely.
So Becca and Dennis, you guys are wonderful success stories, and we were proud to have you here today, this afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. Joe, thank you for your presentation. I thank all of you for joining us today. I hope it means that we'll see more CFA applications coming over the next few weeks. Please reach out to Joe Taswell at the email that he shared at the Empire State Development Corporation, and to the links for additional information. I thank all our community partners. Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for your participation and assistance today. I thank my Borough Hall staff and team for organizing and facilitating this webinar. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. See you all soon. Bye-bye now. Have a good day. You're welcome. Thank you.